to like use any foul language whatsoever to get my point across. But the system actually is broken, right? It needs to be fixed. So as a symptom of this, I then sometimes use foul language. I'm not a foul person by nature. I just use this kind of stuff because it's the best way to get a point across, because people will remember it. Because, oh my god, this guy who like has all this shit together most of the time says some really unhinged stuff. He gets you to pay attention, puts a little abstraction in there so you get to know what's going on. That's like my whole thing, right? Makes a whole bunch of sense. By the way, here's a bunch of bullshit. It has to happen. It's character building. It's fun.
By the way, I will say, when systems are broken, there's always going to be people that take advantage of it, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's what I'm saying.
And what you can hope is that whoever takes advantage of the system is better than like people that would have taken otherwise the problems otherwise, right? Like if you look at
you can hope that they're so egregious that they inspire someone better to fix it.
Hey.
I don't think that's possible, to be honest.
It's not possible to be that egregious or to fix it.
To fix it.
What if you haven't met somebody egregious enough?
I think fixing problems like this requires collective effort from all of society. And I think we've gone past that point.
Or we look at it like as if it was X.com. We just rebuild it.
Well,
I don't know. Half of X.com is still retarded.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. You can rebuild it. You can rebuild the core functions are there. We could just have to rebuild what exists on top of that. The foundations are still great. The foundations of civilization are amazing. They're just forgotten.
Look at the people that are on this website, right? There's a lot of intelligent people on the site, but half of them are still retarded. How many times do you see a retarded-ass post with 400,000 likes for no fucking reason?
That itself is not the problem.
I think those are real.
The problem isn't that there are dumb things. There are always going to be dumb things. I think if you, like, for example, if you look at elections, it took a lot of stupid things, like sending $50 million worth of condoms to another country. Like, what the fuck was happening? Things had to get so ridiculous before election results happen. And then somebody like Elon went, fuck it, I gotta go help the government because this is really stupid. If things get egregious enough, I think it will shift. I hope we see a shift. Like, I think societally, pendulums tend to swing. And I think we went excessively in the, hey, no judgment of any decisions people make, whether it's scamming other people or being virtual, not going to use words that want to get canceled. But
I don't know. I don't agree, right? Because let's look at the pendulum swinging now, right? Supposedly things are getting more conservative and more trad now, and it's like the full left-wing bullshit. But if you look at like the right-wing bullshit as well, it's still fucking OnlyFans, except it's with trad wives now. They've become like Christian women now, right? It's like the pendulum has supposedly swung. Yes, the pendulum is just the opposite of what it used to be, but at the same time, it's the same, right? It's like that shoe horse.
Basically, what the pendulum is just one.
You're following Josie in the calendar, aren't you?
It just swung one direction or the other way too hard. There's no way that any of this can exist. Systems have to understand, or people that lead systems have to understand that coexistence is something that needs to happen. Because for some reason, in this universe, there is this weird force that whenever there's a tower built, and it's the only fucking tower, it just tears it down! I don't understand this. It doesn't make any fucking sense. It's literally written into biblical text. You got the fucking Tower of Babel, right? Somebody builds it, somebody's gonna knock it down. It's always like this. If it's not God, it's going to be another human being. Look, envy exists, right? You get to a certain point, you make dumb decisions. Sure, you're very high up now, but somebody's going to like nag at your foundation and tip you over. This is how it works. So the ideal place to exist is right at the center, and you are trying to make sure that the pendulum doesn't swing too far into either direction, because it will just destroy everything in its
But every time it will swing to the wrong direction. And by the time it starts swinging into the right direction has turned into the wrong direction.
Yeah, but the question is there
think about this with real quick? So, I look at this the same way I look at the stock market, and pick any like individual security and look at the chart for it. Right? It starts somewhere, and then it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. But what we are as a society is the moving average. So if it goes up, that's good for people that are long on whatever that security is. It's terrible for people that are short for it. And then it hits a peak, and then it starts to go down, and the people that are long, when it starts to go down, are like, oh shit, the world's on fire, this is the worst thing that ever happened, oh my god, this is really bad. But the people that are short that security are thrilled. But as a moving average, we're still just dancing around an invisible line of bullshit. And I think that's what society is, between liberalism and conservatism. I'm still saying that wrong.
It's just religion. Really, I think people overcomplicate it way too much. I think people overcomplicate it way too much. It's just basically religion and principles, and when people discard principles and a religion that enforces them, especially with the majority, because they don't have the intelligence to actually stick to their principles beyond the threat of some divine intervention, so they need divine intervention, or the threat thereof, in order to basically have them stick to their principles, which is weird, honestly, because if you are genuinely good, you don't need the threat of some divine intervention to keep you in line. Right? Maybe you understand it to a certain extent and it guides you better.
Why do you think I'm a gangster disciple?
It always is this way. The best thing, not just for yourself but others, and you understand.
I was actually thinking about that the other day about the word GD.
Whenever somebody tells you this, they're like one of those people who want to somehow make an excuse for why they killed someone. Some shit like that, you know? And it's like there's no reason for why they killed somebody. There's no reason for that whatsoever. They just happen to do it at the time because of the bloodlust, and they say, oh, we don't fucking care. You know, it's all subjective. It's all this or it's all that. No, it's not. It's objectively fucked or something's objectively good, right? Life or death. There's no fucking in between.
You know who it is.
So,
it's your friend Elon Musk.
When we look at today's world, we believe in things that don't make sense. Well, like not we. I would say that a very large majority believe in things that don't make sense. And don't believe in things that could make things work.
I'm actually going to disagree with you on the objectivity of how good someone is.
But literally, objectively, either you decide to burn down the grass field or you decide not to. And if you decide to burn down the grass field, you do it in such a way that nothing gets destroyed in the process, aside from just the grass that wants to burn anyway.
Talking about me?
All of your morals as of now.
You son of a bitch! Mr. McLibtard!
And the religions that set those cultures. Without those,
that is fundamentally incorrect. Not with me.
It is not incorrect. It is not incorrect whatsoever.
I fundamentally discarded all of the fucking cultural programming that has ever existed within me and have created my own thing. I am nobody's bitch, and I have no religion.
Well, that's what you think, right? But
you have grown up. There is no values.
No, you're incorrect.
Okay, describe one fundamental value that I have that is consistent with one culture. Explain.
You're an exception.
Why is killing someone bad?
It depends. There are dependencies. No. Wait a minute. You can't make a fundamental claim, drop that, and walk away from it. You have to actually be specific. What I mean is, one specific thing that I have, thing that you will find with only one culture on Earth.
Why is Why is killing bad? Why is killing someone bad?
Depends on what you kill. There are dependencies. You cannot make that argument. It doesn't make any sense. It leads nowhere. That's basically a bunch of heuristics that I've already stated to you. I've stated that.
Because
when you have a grass field, when you have a grass field, this grass field needs to be burnt routinely. Now, technically speaking, the idea of burning down the grass field is bad, definably. However, there are ways to get around this, and you say, the grass field actually needs to be burnt every now and then. Otherwise, the grass grows too tall, it starts dying, and then basically you have all this biomass there that, if not burnt now, will burn later and more intensely and take everything with it. So what you do is you control that shit a little bit. So technically, you do the thing that is somehow bad, but actually good in this way. So it depends on the context. Say, for instance, if you had a pedophile and you decided to sentence this guy to death, that is perfectly fine. That is 100% perfect. That is all okay. It depends on why you do something. And specifically, because they didn't pay attention to this, specifically the example that I mentioned is saying, hey, I just did something for no fucking reason whatsoever. I just decided because I have the bloodlust, and it's not that complex. It's actually quite easy. What the fuck is wrong with this piece of shit meat bun?
Who taught you that burning the grass field was bad?
I fucking observed it. Whoa. Burning it in which context? Burning it because it was too big, or burning it because it was not big enough? What do you mean? Which context specifically?
In whatever
Nobody
context.
teaches you this shit. You just look at it. We're like, oh, hey, by the way, did you know this grass grows this tall over this many years? So you can do two things. You can cut it down, or you can burn it down.
Keeps cutting. It's fucking annoying. I'm gonna try to go back in there. Fucking guy's so fucking stupid.
I don't do thou shalt not kill because of the fucking Bible. I never read the Bible until I was like age fucking 19.
It still affects the culture that you grow up in.
There's a utilitarian argument for it. So it's not even about culture. It's not even about religion. It's hardwired into the human beings, and this transcends cultures. It's everything to do with the utility of not killing another human being, because if you do that, that's one less human being that may potentially be able to grow crops or go hunt livestock with you. Like, we're just not as evolved as we like to think we are.
Well,
I hear you, I do, but it's very much a utilitarian kind of hardwiring thing, in my opinion.
But Paul, the utilitarian argument fails because if you're overpopulated, there is killing. And if you look at
what do you want to know, Suave?
The way you can look at this is
how do you determine that, though?
I mean, we have seen it, right? There are many animal populations that kill alpha males because it's better for their genetic survival if there are less other males. So there are many different ways you can get into philosophy if you go down the philosophical path. But I would argue the question is more of like, you're saying it's thousands of years of religion. How do you know it's religion and not a neural imprint, just like we know sweets and sugars taste good, right? Like, kids are born, they know certain things. We know what pain is. We see concern on kids' face when you make sad faces. When someone is hurt, they make a sad face. Undoubtedly, when you kill people, they make sad faces. We as humans have, at a neurological level, a mirroring capability. So I would argue, just on that alone, it's bad because it makes you feel bad.
Why is slavery bad?
Because it makes you feel bad.
But it makes the slave owners feel good.
It doesn't make the slave owners feel good.
It definitely does, otherwise they
Actually, the slave owner has like a part of their brain that's missing, if anything. Or it's just the most innovational thing that you come up with at the time. Like, say, for instance, from that same perspective...
It's what every single civilization has done. Up until recently.
Yes, because every civilization has had a Joe Biden in their lives. It's not an argument. That's just shitty leadership.
Every civilization, including every single person that's on this space right now, because every single one of the pieces of electronics we're using is made with slave labor in China.
No, there's a different way to look at this. If you look at abundance, right? At a time when you didn't have abundance, slavery was a necessity, you could argue, and that's why societies did that at that time. There's a lot of things we've slowly evolved, quote-unquote, evolved out of, but you could argue maybe we didn't evolve out of it, it's that it is no longer a necessity. And if it was a necessity again, we would, quote-unquote, devolve back to it. But maybe that's less about...
Yeah, but if you were born 500 years ago, would you still have the same opinion on slavery as you do now?
No, I would. Yep. My opinion being relative.
Actually, no. Yes. Okay, so here's a way out of this. Technically, slavery actually does still exist, and there's a way that can exist without it being a problem. Prisons. So say, for instance, by execution of what slavery is, you get no monetary reward of any kind for the fact that you've done work. You get your food, you get a fucking cell, and that's it. Why? Because you did something you did something stupid, so now you have to atone to society for what you've done. Here you go, we take you, put you into jail, but instead of you rotting away on the fucking taxpayer's dime, we put you to work, just like what they do in El Salvador. Technically, by execution, that is slavery, but by what it actually is, fundamentally, it is alright. Because these people were going to cause damage to society anyways. Like, no. You have the fucking gangs, they roam around, they cause a bunch of destruction, so you fucking take them all, bag them and tag them, give them a fucking cell, give them a job. Until eventually they are let out, and you do this enough times, then nobody's going to be a fucking gang member anymore. Because it just doesn't make any sense. Because do you want to be enslaved by the government? Probably not.
Yeah, I don't define that as slavery.
It literally is by execution and definition slavery.
No, it's not.
Well,
It's just
That's indentured servitude.
You're an indentured servant.
Injection
Yeah,
down.
exactly.
Okay, perhaps.
Indentured servitude. I don't count those two as the same thing.
well,
Yeah, but in this case, you're getting like zero reward for anything. You're just getting food because otherwise you die. It would be shit if you died.
The reward is the fact that you're basically saved from the death penalty.
Hold on, Auda. How about this? You're making the argument about slavery being required and societies would have done it, etc., right? Do you think that slavery was abolished by the slaves or by the slave owners?
Owners.
Right, so now you have to ask that same question to yourself. If slavery was so good, why would the slave owners abolish slavery?
Because of philosophical reasons.
Why would they have philosophical reasons that make
Well,
them
if you look at a lot of the Christian ones,
has anybody ever questioned if sugar is sweet?
no.
Therefore, it cannot be the case that slavery was good, as obviously as sugar is sweet. Otherwise, no one would question it.
If they were questioning it, if they weren't questioning it, they wouldn't have done it.
That's what I'm saying. If they didn't question it, it wouldn't have been abolished. You're saying slavery was done.
Yeah, but
I'm saying,
it
what
wasn't
if that's
done.
the starting state?
There were people that were trying to protect it, right?
Right, but that just means that some people were not.
This was a human
evolved.
default. This one, no, I don't think it was that human. They weren't as evolved. I think this was a philosophical thing, and they took it from religion, where they believed that no man.
Has this fucking motherfucker heard of the Civil War of the United States of America?
I'm going to make the
No,
argument.
but all of morality is based off of religion.
No, this is so. Let me see if we can present you an argument that converts your mind here.
When you look at the okay, let's look at the Middle East, for example.
Well, no,
He didn't come to listen, bitch. He came to talk.
And you feed them very, very well, and you put them in a tank with other fish. They don't just randomly kill fish, right?
Mhm.
You could argue that the shark has a religion that it thinks it shouldn't kill fish. After a while, if you feed it feed that doesn't look like fish, even though it tastes like fish, that isn't a religion, that is an instinct. So maybe the shark doesn't actually want to do that, but it does it out of need, right?
I'm not saying
there are many ways you could argue a system can be designed where the inputs into the system cause a different output. And you're arguing that religion is the reason why things are happening, and I'm trying to present to you that many things happened that had nothing to do with religion. The slave owners also were the ones
I'm saying
who dictated
modern
religions.
day. I'm saying modern day. Ethics.
But we got to this.
What
we
we
got to
find
this modern
ethical.
day. Ethics
Hey, girl.
Iteratively.
Yes.
Sexy oiled up Jesus.
But that was as a
Oh,
result of
Jesus. You need
Religion. When they were
Jesus.
talking about freeing the slaves, it was based off of religion.
So Socrates literally made an argument using religion for the reasons to continue to have slavery.
Yes. That's why
So
it was
you
kept
can-
around.
Yeah. So what exactly
But-
changed? That you can't say
People were
religion
having
was a variable.
people have been debating religions. It's not just something that you sit down and you're like, okay,
Right.
this is my
So people
interpretation.
didn't agree with it, right? So that means that
Yes.
something innately inside
Well,
the humans made them feel
they
it was
were
wrong.
doing this. Yeah, they had a base. and based off their interpretation of the base. That's how they came to the conclusions that they did.
Or, alternative proposal, humans thought or were told slavery is good. They see it, they see the impact of it, and it makes them feel bad. And they wish, man, if we only had an abundance, if we had tractors, if we had other machines, I wouldn't have to enslave people. And as those things start to become reality in some places, all of a sudden, even though it wasn't available to everybody, that starts to become a thing where some people just don't want to do it anymore. And then they say, well, you shouldn't do it either, even though you don't have the means to buy the tractors, but I do.
It's called compassion.
I don't think a compassion as big of an impact as you say it does.
It literally does. You have people... No. Okay, actually, I can make a counter-argument here. The reason why you believe this way, why you believe these things, is because what has been done to you in your past is so diverse and so fucked to a creativity so fundamental that you are not really yourself anymore, and you've become this other thing that sees sometimes even people I think as disposable. That's your thing. I see people this way too, but I have this problem. I see myself in them. That's the difference. I don't, like, for instance, if I have the ability to, say, destroy a person for no fucking reason whatsoever, I don't do this because I fear divine retribution. I do this because I see myself in it, in this thing. Why the fuck would I do anything like that? Why would I do that? What if somebody did that to me? It's just a state of awareness. It's like, okay,
hold on. I'm not particularly religious either, right? And I'm not not doing things because of divine retribution. I'm not doing it because of divine retribution. But I think it's just necessary to live in a civilization. And to live in a civilization, you need to have a base. And the base...
Yeah, but to get there, you need slavery. And the reason why slavery exists is because people are greedy, and if you've lived your life surrounded by greed and frugality, you will see things as absolutely and ultimately disposable. That's how it works.
Well, no, hold on, Adrian. There could be an alternative, right? Imagine you're in a world where you need 10 human units of labor to feed 8 humans, and that is just the struggle in the world in which you live at the time. What you can choose to do is say, okay, we're going to have 10 people work and 2 people just die. Or you could say, okay, I guess we're going to have 10 people work and 4 people only get half the people's worth of food. So they don't get a great life. And they go, well, I don't want to be those 4 people. And then the other 6 get together and go, okay, we're going to oppress you, and we're going to make it work through violence. And then you end up in a default state of slavery. So this is why I use the word evolve. If you look at, there's a great book, Abundance, on this too, by the way. As you increase abundance, as you increase resource, violence goes down, in theory, right? And this is very telling for why I'm being passionate about this. AI has the potential to dramatically continue to increase abundance, as we do see it will be wasted in some ways with things like maybe crypto. But having a lot of abundance, if you have a ton of resources, you can be as wasteful as you want, and there's no the negative feeling of empathy that you get from the wasted resources starts to decline, and hopefully more and more violence starts to decline. So I think this, when you ask me that question out of would my morality change, if I express my morality as a constant, yes. I think that's the problem. People should be expressing their morality as an algebraic equation with some inputs in it, and some of those inputs happen to be, we can't obviously name them all, but it would be things like, in the society, what is the food situation? Is there actually like a utilitarian need that some portion of the society is going to have to be at a lower level in order to allow society to progress, or for some portion of society to live at the standard that humans feel like they need? And it's not just...
Then how do you explain the differences in people's morality?
The morality is then just those variables that I just described. Some of those variables contain personal factors like how much resources you have, how much trauma you personally have suffered, how much trauma your parents suffered.
Have you read a book?
Burden on you. How tall you are.
Have you read a book?
Basketball. Like, there's various other factors. It is somewhat relativistic in that sense.
So in that case, you don't have a shared sense of objective morality,
No,
which is
you
what
do.
Adrian was claiming.
No, you do. You have that grand unification equation. The equation is the same.
Grand unification equation? Did it come from a book?
The variables just slip.
So, as an example, if somebody's 99 years old and another person's 20, and there's a nuclear fusion reactor that has melted down, and one person needs to go inside and push the button, and either person is capable of doing it, the morality for both of them will yield a different result. Even if the equation is the same, ones will say, I shouldn't go and I should let the other person go, and the other persons will say, I should go because I don't have as much time to live.
Okay, let's take another example.
You guys are all familiar with the trolley problem.
Let's take another example. Let's say
Bruh.
beating your kids when they do something wrong. Some parents think it's correct. Some parents think it's incorrect. There's not a shared sense of morality.
No. You're looking at the wrong thing. See, the way you're looking at this is you're saying, I am looking at the result of the equation, and I'm saying because the result of the equation for two different people is different, they don't have a shared sense of morality. We just used an example of the nuclear fusion reactor, right, where somebody has to go in, and one outcome was the other person should go, and the other outcome was I should go. Those results are not the same, but the reason why they're not the same is because there was a variable of age. In the case of beating kids, the variable is how much do they understand how psychology works? How much do they understand trauma? Did they go through trauma? Did it help them? What was their personal experience with it? Do they have any other tools that they know how to raise kids without violence? Because let's say you really have two situations. One where the parent knows that hitting their kids is how they were raised, and if they hit their kids, they're going to have a positive outcome. And they don't know any other skills, so if they don't hit the kids are going to be spoiled brats and maybe harm themselves and hurt themselves and not make it to, a full life. And then there's another parent who was hit, but also was later on taught skills on how to send the kid a timeout, how to use words, how to communicate. So now they have more tools in their toolbox, and they go, now that I have these other tools in the toolbox, hitting the kid is immoral. Because I have these kids. Because I have these tools.
I want to bring this full circle. I'm going to tie it back to AI too. But I think that all of the things that you just described also have weights. And the weights are based on culture and experience. So just like an LLM, I think that individuals have weights that they assign to each of these different things. So if I use, say, the nuclear reactor example, and it's two people talking about, oh, it's better if I go in, no, it's better if you go in, whatever that is, that's going to be predicated on the perceived value or the estimated value of the outcome that will happen and how much someone gives a shit. And give a shit is a weight as well. So if an individual with a family... All right, go ahead and correct it then.
Sorry, I think what I'm trying to make the argument of is what you're saying is the personal, they're going to have personal experiences and stuff. Those are variables. Each individual has a varied life. So those are the variable factors. The weights are the relativistic, the real multiples that you would apply to each of those variables. So you can think of each parameter as a weight times a variable. And then that's also...
I agree. I think we're saying the same thing, just using different words for it. I agree.
Yeah, I was just correcting just for Adrian's sanity, I think. And needed as well. It's, from an AI perspective, weights are the... And so you could argue, if that was the case, and one could determine and learn and discover what those weights are, you have gotten as close to a god, if that's the way... Grand unification theory, if you will.
Grand unification theory!
So I think the argument of indoctrination, it works because it's the most scalable, but genuinely suffering, hardship, teaches you a fundamental truth about the universe. So then you come up with your own rules as to how to mitigate that. Like, think about it this way. I saw something about the way that I was put into the world and what I was taught as fundamentally incorrect bullshit. So I decided, as many other people do in life, to discard it. You become an atheist, actually. Right? Many people have done this. I'm pretty sure that at least a majority of the people here who are intelligent and have some sort of thing that they're going for themselves in the future right now, at one point in their lives, they just went completely atheist because they decided none of this matters, right? So
I was like that too.
You build, so then you look around you and you're like, the universe is a piece of shit, but it's only a piece of shit because I can't work with it. I can work with it somehow just like somebody else is and turn it, from my perspective, into less of a piece of shit because it's just a system into which you put things in and you get things out. There's some weird fundamental thing about reality. It doesn't make any sense. It's not necessarily intuitive, but it's there. So then you structure your way around that, and that's how you find your way back to God, because that's the only thing that is most logical. Whatever my definition of God is just like this weird function, this effect that exists in the world. It's not something that I can put into words. It's a feeling. It's a state of being. And it's a thing that exists inside of you. That's what I see as be the creator, something that just sat at the base of the universe, created everything that you see around you, imbued it with various qualities, and you have those qualities live within you, and you become the extension of them, for better or worse, because both of these exist at the same time and have to. And it's just a response to the environment that you have around you. Sure, okay, cool. Then if you have 1,000 years of indoctrination, then you have a very specific environment, and then you just change accordingly, and you embrace values of this environment so that you can function within them. But I've been in an environment which is very antithetical to the values that I represent right now at this very moment even. So how did I do that? Because I came up with my own thing. I looked at examples that are around me, sure, and they persisted because of 1,000 years of indoctrination, but there's still the same wisdom that just exists and just comes to be because it's a logical conclusion to a path. For instance, a great example of this is Stoicism. I knew what Stoicism was and the rules and the stuff that this person lived by well before I even knew that that guy existed. When I looked into parts of that book, I realized I didn't have to read it because I already understood it. Because it's just a fucking equation that scales up from the
Fucking guy. I didn't have to read it because I already understood it, huh? Oh, okay.
But because you ought to. There is no reason to do anything good
whatsoever. Alright, I'm not on Elon Musk's bus anymore. Fuck this guy. What a fucking toad.
Do you want to be remembered as a hero? Do you want to be remembered as a person that changed things for the better? Or do you want to be Hitler? You choose. There's like another aspect.
There's a way this was described to me, and I love this space that we can have all kinds of conversations. But this is my favorite way to picture this. Picture a butterfly, and if it flies over to the left, it's flying into the past, it's flying over to the right, it's flying to the future. And it's really, really hard to get that butterfly to settle down and sit on your forehead, and that's the only time you're in the present. When you're in the past, you're really, really regretting, you're depressed. When you're in the future, you're very anxious, you're whatever. Only when you're in the present are you not avoidant. Almost everything you can say when you're saying, like, why do people do this? Why do people do that? People don't give a fuck. People don't do this. Anybody who's present is going to be, only when you are present are you able to figure out what the equation actually says. And everybody else who's not present, whether it's because of drugs or it's because of alcohol or social media or just fear of getting started, whatever the case might be, all those things are the things that are clouding up their ability to get to that final equation, if you will. So just like what Adrian was saying, right? Like if people practice meditation, if people practice reading, or they look at books or whatever, certain things resonate. And what I would argue is it is impressive that so many societies all around the world sat under a tree, thought for long periods of time, and came up with basically the same conclusion all around the world.
I'll just add a little bit to that and say that drugs aren't necessarily a detriment to exactly that concept you're talking about. I know people don't follow lean towards
This is where we end up in the modern world, and it's still kind of fucked because of drugs. Like,
no, 100%. I would
go read the book "Be Here Now" by Ram Dass. He was like a '70s hippie, but the entire book is about how he arrived at exactly what you just described through psychedelics.
I've heard this so many times. Obviously my background. I'm just saying I've heard this many times. I've even heard people quote the book by Jonah Lear. Imagine, excellent book. Studies, it walks through how different people use drugs that are very successful. That is an argument I've heard time and time again. But the problem is that equation we talk about, you can't take one parameter from somebody else's equation and apply it to yours. And when people share their stories, they don't share all the parameters in their stories. The thing that gave the person resilience to take the drugs and achieve that, someone else may not have. And so when they take the drugs, they could fall down. And so promoting that, I think, is a big problem. Dopamine Nation is a great book. Everybody should read it. It kind of goes into good detail over how our brain works. We've talked about this in the space before. Drugs are very... It's like playing with a knife.
Yeah, someone might.
I'm not promoting it whatsoever. I'm just saying that it's not exclusive.
I mean, if you look at Mike Menser, he took meth, and that kind of enabled him.
He took meth. It ain't true for the earth. It's meth.
But Hitler took meth too, and it allowed him to, quote unquote, accomplish things others didn't. Right? It's like it's not the drug.
So that's what you can look at it from that side, but you're not also counting in the amount of people that have literally fucking died from not taking that. You know.
Yeah, the way I would argue to look at it is, if you take drugs or anything, you're not present. It just is. My personal definition of a life well lived is, at the end, when you die, if you were to do a mathematical equation and calculate how many milliseconds the person was present versus escaping in some form, whoever has the maximum amount of time they were present lived the most, so they won.
That's also you supposing that you're experiencing what other people are experiencing also, though, which is false to start with.
The only thing that matters to me is how many of my goals did I achieve.
I'm actually not saying this.
That's so exciting.
Paul, I'm not saying this based on my experiences, for what it's worth. I'm saying it from how neural networks work, right? If we look at it from a biological, scientific perspective.
Matt, I'm just going to stop you right there. I can tell you that I've been on a variety of different substances over time, and I've been very, very, very present, and they've had transformational consequences on my life in fantastic ways. I'm not saying that's everybody's experience, but it has been mine. So to say that people are not necessarily present is a little myopic unless you're down that road. And being down that road, again, like I know full well that the conversation we're having here, statistically, my experiences would be anomalous. So
I have a friend.
Just factually incorrect.
I have an ex-friend, not friend anymore, who completely destroyed their life with drugs. I can tell you that story. Yeah.
I know a lot of people I went to school with are dead because of drugs, right? So there's both sides for sure.
Right, but the majority is going to be bad outcomes because not everyone can actually control. There's a problem with this. You lose your actual self, this heuristic. There seems to be something fundamental about what you are in the real world that you lose. It's like this feeling of consequences, you know what I mean? Like, imagine if you play games all day and you have no connection to reality. Or like, for instance, you argue, actually, here's a better one. Imagine you're like one of these really severe lefty people and you argue with people online, but you really have a plan of pissing everybody off and being an asshole to everyone until somebody punches you in the face. Then all of a sudden you wake up. Right, like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. This is applicable to literally everyone. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine how many times you get like a death threat online, and then if you like actually look at who the person is, it's some random fucking fat dude in his basement. I'm not saying this even to insult them. I'm just saying that this is the reality of the situation.
I know I got a bit of a dad bod going,
they
but
just don't have the funds to
I don't live in my mom's basement.
Right? That is a thing.
I live on her first
That should be
floor.
discounted, and that's an edge case for sure, but a very detrimental one at that. Right? So that exists, right? This is a disconnect from reality. I think Meta's point is that you have to have an impact on reality. You have to be connected to it directly. Do things within it. And I think we could also define like which drugs do which things and in which dosages, right? Say for instance,
he's high on ketamine right now.
Like hold over Elon, which is really fucking stupid, is the fact that he had, I'm pretty sure he had, I'm not sure if he still has, of course, it's a very personal thing, he doesn't talk about it, which is is right, and you should respect that. Ketamine, right? If you overuse it, you're going to have various interesting effects, right? But if you use it in proper dosages, it can actually have very positive effects. Same thing goes for coffee, for instance. If you overuse it, you're going to have negative effects. If you use it in moderation, you have positive effects. Weed, for instance, is a similar example. Let's say, for instance, somebody has Parkinson's, and they take a certain type of weed. Now, all of a sudden, nicotine, same thing. Now, all of a sudden, their spasms are just disappearing. That's incredible, right? But now, if everybody abuses these substances, everything goes bad. The majority is going to abuse these substances because they don't have like this internal thing that's baked into them to basically limit. It's the same thing with eating, right? If that was actually true, if it was actually true for people to limit themselves, then the majority wouldn't be obese, right? Because there's actually no way to limit this, because it bypasses the logic part of your brain, and you have like this weird instinctive thing that takes over that just tells you to consume, because it's actually nice to consume. Some people genuinely love eating, which is a mystery to me, right? So I can't really understand that. So I'll chalk it up to something that is, instinctive in nature, because people just sit there and eat. And I do have this part of understanding only because if I have like a bag of snacks, right, and I eat snacks from this bag, I will keep eating constantly until that bag is empty. But here is something you have to imagine. If that bag were to refill itself constantly without me noticing, will I stop eating eventually? Probably not. That's the thing. So even within me that exists. Well, normally I don't enjoy eating. Eating a snack is actually quite rewarding in a sense, right? So people keep doing that. So you don't actually have like this conscious limiter. You just have a limiter because your resources are gone. It's your limiting factor. For everything's added to you, it's still there. And drugs, I think, work in much the same way because they are quite potent. A lot of drugs are quite potent. So normally you get like a pretty large amount of them, and then you could consume copious amounts of these and then fuck up your life. Not a good thing. It's a terrible thing. And being present, it's more than just being on or off drugs. It's a state of being. It's literally a state of being, in my opinion. Right? Somebody could literally just be in the field working their ass off, but they're not entirely present, right? They're not shaping things in the same way that somebody else could be doing. So I think it's a little bit more complex than drugs. So I'm like trying to basically argue the devil's advocate literally in everyone's favor here. It's very difficult, but it's working. I think, at least. So I think it's about execution, what impact you have on reality. And I think the most present are people that have had a great lasting impact. One that is actually beneficial, because if it is beneficial and fundamental to the point that nobody can cover it up, and nobody really has the need to cover it up, and the need to keep it uncovered is greater than the need for it to be covered, that's how you've succeeded.
I think
let's put it this way, because Adrian, I think you highlight a great point here, right? Think about a lot of the world's greatest musicians. I'll just say like the Grateful Dead as a for instance, and whether or not you like them or you don't, candidly, I'm choosing them just because of their connection to culture and not because I particularly like them. I couldn't even name a single song. Take that for what it is. But I think it applies to a lot of other musicians as well. Probably, before the times any of these substances were made illegal, artists thrive on this kind of stuff. And they make lasting impact and do good in the world. And it is about what you actually do. And, there's a big difference between utilization and addiction.
So, Paul, this is an excellent example because it is the exact example that's often used. It's covered in Dopamine Nation and Jonah Lear as well. And you can actually look into why do certain drugs get used by certain groups, right? Like why was cocaine and amphetamines used by mathematicians, while depressants were used by certain musicians and amphetamines were used by others, etc. When you look at these drugs, every single one of these drugs, it is important to understand that when these musicians were working really, really hard, Elon's working really, really hard, they're doing something extremely different than the average person. And you have to ask yourself, chicken and egg here. Did these people start working hard and then do drugs? Or did they start doing drugs and then work hard? And almost always, you will find that they worked hard, achieved success, then did drugs. And so you cannot rewrite the story and say the drugs led them to be successful. In fact, maybe after they became successful, the use of drugs limited their future success. And this is where the upregulars and downregulators in the seesaw example from Dopamine Nation is very important to understand, right? And if you'll indulge me, I'll just describe it really quickly because I think it's very important to understand. If you think of a dopamine meter, 0 is empty, 100 is the maximum you can possibly ever get. 20 to 80 is where your body keeps you. It's like we've got a defense mechanism because we know we're in a simulation, and we know that outside input can fuck up our brain, whether it's drugs or VR or social network or whatever it might be. Our brains have a mechanism to keep ourselves from being hijacked. If your dopamine falls below 20, it's like life is so bad you might as well just kill yourself. If your dopamine goes above 80, life is so good, you're so elated, you may as well never leave the cave, never hunt, and you will starve to death. So because of this, the survival instinct keeps you between 20 and 80. What happens with drugs is if you're cruising at 50 all the time, and you take just enough drugs to get up to 80, great, you played with fire, you didn't get burned, you survived. Arguably, maybe that has some value. If you took too much and you got up to 90, these little gremlins hop on the seesaw, they bring it down, and now instead of cruising at 50, you cruise at 40 for the rest of the time until you go do something hard to bring yourself down below to 10 so you get little balloons and then cruise at 50 again. This is the reality. Almost everybody who falls off the wagon copied somebody who was successful who then indulged in drugs, thought that they would get the success by indulging in the drugs, and confused the order of causation.
So what you're saying is smoke weed.
As we study the mind, I just think it's such a big thing in our society. We really need to stop fantasizing about how nice drugs are.
I sincerely question some of the science behind what you're talking about, and I think brain chemistry is so incredibly dynamic to generalize like that is borderline disingenuous. I know you're reciting statistics you've heard out of
Just say no.
I don't think that's the case. I do agree that
Just
there
say
is a
no.
massive pitfall here, and that a lot of people
Just say
can fall into
no,
that pattern, but
Alan.
it's not universal. It's definitely not.
I'm happy to engage further in the future, and we can use reference material and source material. But this is not just from me quoting one book for what it's worth, right? I've made a career in this space.
So, Meta, what do you think about Steve Jobs? He specifically mentioned LSD as having changed his life, and he literally recommended that everyone do at least LSD once in their lifetime.
I give you the same thing that there are many people out there that are terrible coaches but great basketball players, and there are many people out there that are great coaches but terrible basketball players. You can't just look at people who are successful and ask them why they were successful. They don't always know. That's number one. Number two, when he talks about LSD, he talks about how it opened up his eyes, it opened up his mind, it brought him to a different place. Well, guess what? Before that, Steve Jobs, when he was in college and stuff, he used to go to temples and eat because he was that broke. That man had a hard life before he had indulgence.
He died of fruitcake. His wife is living on a $300 million yacht. His wife enjoyed all the fruit.
I think that's a different place to start.
I'm clipping the shit out of this. I got tons of good Elon Musk ketamine videos. What happened? Did it crash?
I think there's an interesting philosophical constant here, is the need to defend ideas. Like there has to be. It's actually good when you see a person fighting back to a certain extent. And this is like within all of us here, right? We're pushing back. It's actually very good. Isn't it also funny that we seem to have our lives together in a very specific way? Like we're quite successful in our own ways.
You're about to fire me, Elon.
So
Fuck you, man.
But we have our
Fuck
values.
you.
That's the thing. Everybody has their own set of values. I think that if you buy into another's
I'm smoking
set of
weed,
values,
Elon.
that's
I'm
like your
smoking
core
weed,
thing
Otto. What are you gonna
alone,
do
that
about
there's
it?
no
I'm not going.
actual
It's not
identity to
ruining
you.
my life. I
You're
don't
just an
think.
NPC. You just think you're a higher value NPC. Yes, to someone else, but not yourself.
The one and only
This is
Nicole and
self-mastery
holy
culture, I
moly,
think.
Jesus,
I think that
these
means
nuts.
I appreciate
In
you.
a
That.
sense,
I
yes.
think you're wrong, but you also think that I'm wrong, and like you said, we'll debate on it later.
I think,
It's
actually,
funny.
here's the thing. I think both of you are correct. I just don't think that Paul quite understands Meta's position. I think Meta, you kind of understand his position. You're just trying to like basically account for accuracy. But I think Paul,
Yes.
looking at this thinking that he's trying to make a blanketed he's trying to assert something, and you think it's a blanketed one, like it's a blanketed assertion.
Well, I'm hearing generalized statements. So you could say that, all right, if you want to pick a specific,
all right, I'm gonna restart this live.
nicotine or caffeine or heroin.